Welcome to the Zencast. My name is Dale Pickles, Managing Director of B Squared and the host of the Zencast, the podcast for special educational needs and disability. In this episode, we discussed young carers and the importance of giving them a voice. And this week, I was joined by Kasia Thompson, a teaching assistant and young carer coordinator at St Regis CE Academy, with a passion for supporting inclusion and understanding, particularly for families raising a disabled child. Here at B Squared, we help to show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make, and we help schools to choose for a wide range of abilities and ages. We have a range of frameworks to suit students from birth all the way through to 25. And at the top end, we have our Steps for Life framework that looks at functional academic skills, employability skills, and life skills. And at the other end of the spectrum, for our complex learners in informal learning, we have our engagement step that can build a profile of the student needs and helps to show those really small steps of progress. Visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me and take you through our assessment software and how it can help you. But for now, let's get on with the podcast. My guest this week is Kasia Thompson, a teaching assistant and young caring coordinator at St Regis CE Academy. And she has a passion for supporting inclusion and understanding, particularly for families raising a disabled child. Kasia developed an award-winning initiative supporting young carers within a mainstream secondary school. And she has been dedicated advocate for ensuring that these students feel seen, supported, and empowered. Welcome to the show, Kasia.
Thank you, Dale. It's lovely to be here.
You are welcome. Young carers are often a hidden group within our schools, balancing their learning with significant caring responsibilities that can shape their attendance, well-being and development. As schools are now required to identify and report young carers, this feels like a really good moment to explore how we recognise support and truly listen to them.
Absolutely. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. So young carers' lives are shaped by disability within their families, and it's all linked to their emotional world, and their routines are deeply connected to it. So it's a good time to be having this conversation now that it's part of Ofsted's requirements as well, that schools are keeping track of the number of young carers that they have. So a young carer is a child or a young person under the age of 18 who helps to care for a family member. The family member will normally need support due to disability, illness, mental health needs, or addiction. And in our school, which I will go on to talk about a bit more, we are doing a lot of work with identifying students who have a disabled sibling. So at the moment in our school, we have 861 students, so we're quite a small secondary school, but 68 of those have been identified as young carers. So that's quite a high percentage. And then 49% of those young carers are supporting siblings. So it's almost a 50-50 split of young people that are supporting either an adult in their family or it's a sibling. They've got some kind of a caring role around supporting a sibling.
And when we're talking about that support, I'm guessing we're talking about support that is probably known to an external agency. Is there because you definitely have to find that it's a child or young person below 18 supporting someone with but it's like, okay, is there a definition for that side of it?
So they have a caring role. That's what we are identifying. That's what we're looking for. They have a caring role. Now, not all of those students that we've identified will have a large caring role. Some will just it's the fact that the sibling is a part of their life and their life is affected by it. So we want to identify those students because we want them to know that they're not alone and they have the opportunity to talk to people and that there's support available for them. Because a lot of families, it's like you're looking after family members because that's what families do. But that caring role can affect you quite a lot. It's a lot to carry. My motivation for supporting young carers at school is that I'm a parent carer myself. So my son has cerebral palsy, so he's a full-time wheelchair user. And he's also non-speaking autistic. So there's quite a lot of support needs there. And it's a big role. But as a parent carer, I went 10 years before I even asked for any support. I remember because it was his 10th birthday, and it just kind of hit me suddenly that 10 years we've been supporting him, and it's quite a big job. And as a parent, same way as, any other family, you just think, that's this my job, I'm a parent. But knowing that there is support out there by the local authority, but just being able to talk to people and share that, it makes a big difference. So that was one of my motivations to start asking at school, how are we caring for our carers at school? So what did we have in place for our young carers? And when I started asking, there wasn't a list of names or anything. So I literally went from scratch to, how do I find these students in this school who have a caring role? And that was my motivation to kind of get that support in place.
It is interesting, just listening to that. It is, obviously there are going to be people in their household with physical disabilities, medical conditions, but you're also on to, again, a medical condition which requires that constant medical attention, but there's also, they cannot work, they cannot do things without support, but actually there is no external support. You're kind of managing and living on your own. Maybe like with your son, it's like, we've done 10 years together, it's great, but actually this has had an impact on me. And interesting, there is, I know from my cousins, that often when there is a child with SEND, that child can become the focus of the house.
Yeah.
And other children, not intentionally, not for any reason, but can easily kind of disappear and become invisible. And the expectations on them to always put their sibling first can be quite draining on them.
Yes. And it's not a criticism. This is what I try to have conversations with everybody. Like, this is the family dynamic. That's the situation that you're in. And it's one of those things that people do feel negatively about, and they don't know that there's support out there. You can ask for help. My daughter is a young carer because of the family dynamic that we're in. And when I was having conversations with my husband about should we get some support for her or not, it was one of the motivators for that was I didn't want her to look back on her life when she was older and have like negative feeling towards it and like resent how she grew up. So if we're talking about it now, if we're open about it now, and she's had the opportunity to talk to counsellors, and she goes to regular groups where she meets other young carers, and she loves that. So there's lots of things out there which parents and families don't need to feel bad about. It's not a what's the word? It's not something that they've done. It's just making sure that the support is available.
It's no one's fault.
Yes, exactly.
It's no one's fault. It's a situation you're in, and that young person or even a parent can be angry about the situation, but often, or that anger can turn into anger towards the person that may have created that situation through no choice of their own, through all those sorts of things. And it can be really hard to recognize that. And sometimes those sibling relationships or even parent-child relationships can get extremely strained.
Yes. Yeah. And then, so at school, when I've been finding these carers, that's what I want to have, those open conversations with them. And a lot of them don't know that they're carers. So I've done a lot of work about doing assemblies. I've been doing year group assemblies every year. I've done briefings with staff members to make sure that they know what to look for, know the questions to ask. And then if anybody does mention their home situation, they can then pass that information on to me. And then I keep a list of the students' names that I can then go and check in with regularly, let them know that there's support out there. Some of the students I've spoken to have been like, no, that's not me, or whatever. And that's absolutely fine. We do have a lunchtime group on a Thursday every week, and that's voluntary. So, but just telling the students that it's there if they need it, that's one of the biggest things. And particularly for the older year groups who have gone through most of the way through the school without having that young carer support, and we now have it in place. So they're not likely to engage with it that much because it hasn't been there. But just knowing that it's there now, and for the other students coming through the school, that has actually helped quite a lot of them open up. So that has been quite nice.
Because I suppose it's one of those things, it's like in various government forms when you talk about disabilities, it's like, would you describe your home life as normal? It's like, well, it's the only house I've lived in and therefore it's normal. And again, how do you identify that you're a young carer? And again, when you think of young carers, I generally think of, in my head, quite full-on care. But that we're not really talking about how much care they're really doing. We're really talking about what is the impact on that young person. So that's why it's also covering the siblings, because actually, again, if you're an older sibling and you've got a younger sibling, and let's say for your son's cerebral palsy and you have a family day out, there's probably a lot of suddenly days out that automatically are dismissed and things like that, not through any choice, but you want to have an inclusive, fun time. But there's always that one person going, I never get to. And having a family fun day, completely valid. Also, having that feeling of I'm missing out, also completely valid.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why the conversations are important. Just being able to talk openly about it. One of my biggest things about, since I started talking about young carers at school, is that we're kind of creating this environment now, like a culture of being able to talk and share. And like lots of young carers, before we started having these conversations, they just wouldn't tell anyone, or they didn't want anyone to know, or they saw it as a bad thing. Whereas now, because we've got displays all over the school, we're always talking about it. We have PSHE sessions on it. So there's a lot of inclusion around being a young carer. And now our carers, or the younger ones as they come through, they're quite willing to talk about it, and they're quite proud of it. That's what I'm trying to share, that it is something to be proud of, actually. It's a really good skill that they can then take on into their future employment as well, which is one of the things I talk about in assembly, about the empathy that you can't teach. This is empathy that you've just acquired from your home life, which will be able to help in so many different areas of life as it come through.
Now, as part of you prepping for this, you've interviewed some of your students.
Yes.
So we've got a couple of clips we're going to play within this podcast, and we're going to play one in a second, but also there are more which we're going to put in our show notes. So I think probably right now, if we listen to one of your students.
Being understood at school helps me a lot because it makes me realise that I'm not in this alone. Being a young carer is really difficult, especially if you have siblings or parents you have to look after, because you have to look after yourself as well, and that's really important. Having school systems in place can really help me and other students and other young carers with home issues or life matters, because then you have a different support system other than yourself in your head to support you with it, especially in younger years. Your brain hasn't fully developed and hasn't understood how to fully deal and cope with a lot of things. That's why having adults around you and having people who understand what you've been going through is really helpful, because then you can understand how to deal with other situations.
Okay, yes, so that was one of our older students, a year 13 student, giving a bit of advice. And as I just said in the conversation before, how our older students hadn't experienced all of what we've put in place now. So it's been really helpful to have feedback from all of the years, all of our carers in all of the years. The support that we're now got in place for the students coming through, it's as I said, it's like a culture. It's like a whole school environment. So everybody's involved in it. So that's the conversations that we want to be having.
And should we go straight into another clip?
Yes, we can do, yeah.
Yep. So let's listen from Daisy.
At St Regis, what they support you with is that if you're late at school, then you're not really going to get in trouble because they probably know what you're going through. Or if you don't get homework done in the amount of time, you won't really get in trouble because nobody really knows how badly you're actually struggling.
Okay, so some of the things that we have put in place for young carers is they don't, once we've identified them, we've got the list, so they're not going to get in trouble for coming in late, and they're not going to get in trouble for handing in their homework late. So these are two things which we have as part of our young carer policy for the school. So as long as we've identified them, These are not things they're going to be in trouble with because we don't know what's going on at home. And we know they have a caring role, and that could have an impact on their ability to complete work once they come home from school and on what they have to do in order just to get into school. Whereas previously, you'll just be late for any late attendance. But if that's to drop off your sibling at school, or if that's because the sibling or somebody had difficulty getting ready in the morning, then that's not the fault of the student. So these are things that we've made sure that our young carers are aware of, that we will support them with.
So that's an interesting thing. It is completely, basically, I'm not saying it's get out of jail free card. We're not saying that. We're just saying...
Definitely not that.
Yeah, life's a bit more complicated for them. Let's give them a break. And also what we don't want to feel is kind of, if they're getting in trouble at school because of what's going on at home, again, you're going to add that negative feeling at school and at home. Whereas basically, we need that school to be that place where they want to come, they want to learn, it's going to help them with their future. But we also cannot hold their home life against them. They are not to blame, again, for that situation.
Absolutely.
So have you kind of seen, as you've kind of introduced this support, have you seen that for maybe the older children who've been there longer, have you seen their attitudes or how they respond change?
The older students were harder to reach. Absolutely. When I first started, the local authority, I got some advice from the local authority carers team, and they said to me, the hardest thing is for you is going to be to identify the young carers, because they won't want to talk about it. They won't want to be identified, or they don't want to be labelled. And that was a concern. But once I started, as I said, doing the assemblies and doing the awareness and just having those conversations one-on-one, it really helped in terms of seeing which students were open to talking about it. And even the ones that I did have a conversation with one student who, just by having that conversation, got really emotional and got really tearful about just by sharing that. And if I hadn't had mentioned that, we wouldn't have known that this student was struggling, because they would have been hiding it. So it is really important. And statistically, young carers don't have great attendance, and they might not be able to reach the attainment that they should. The Carers Trust have lots of statistics on all of that. But that is what we want to identify. We want to have those conversations, make sure the students know that they're supported. And then we do keep track of their attendance. The attainment is a bit harder. I'm still working on a way to how to implement how we can track their attainment and make sure that nothing is in the way. Because with the older students, they hold on to so much because they haven't been able to share it. And then when they get close to their exam time, these are the students that we find that are struggling or acting out or things like that. So if we were aware of that previously, then we could have put support in place. And that's what I'm trying to do going through the school now, so that all the way, so the students that we've had now, since this support has been in place, all the way through, they're not going to get to sitting their exams holding all that in, because they've had opportunities to vent or to chat and ask for support. And I'm trying to help them with making it okay to ask for support.
And also, you talked about there are probably lots of quite negative and horrible statistics around young carers in terms of those GCSE results, significantly probably less, all that lot. And again, that's not
it's not a judgment.
It's not a judgment.
Yeah.
It's not kind of anything. It is, well, what the judgment is you've got to hear spending a lot less time and be able to focus a lot less on this.
Yes.
And it isn't, and I think there is a thing about GCSEs you only have one shot. And I still kind of worry and fear that if you've missed that one shot, that actually, yes, you can do English and maths again, but actually if you've missed, you want to do history or you want to do geography at A-levels, but you haven't got the 6, you missed it just, actually you can't really retake that unless you go do it yourself. And it's that single point of judgment that really kind of lets them down. It's not saying they can't do this. It's with the amount of time and effort and energy and ability to focus, this is where they've got to at this point. If they had a bit longer, they would get to where they are capable of.
Absolutely. And it's also knowing what support is out there. So for exams, if a student has been impacted by their caring role on the day of their GCSE exams or their A-levels, they can declare it. And there is a point difference, I think, that might be taken into consideration, which I didn't know about until I started doing all this research. So that's it's also good for the schools to be aware that there is that in place. And then for sixth formers, I've found out more about the carers element. So you can't claim carers allowance if you're in full-time education, but there's a carers element that students, when they are 18 and still in education, there is a part of the carers element that they can claim on universal credit. So it's finding out all these things that we can then share with students. Because when I mention that to the sixth formers, it has made a difference to some of them who have been like, well, how am I supposed to study care and then look for a job at the same time? So things like that will make a difference.
That's the thing. If they are in a caring role, and especially if it's an adult they're caring for, that immediately means there's not as much money in that house. So immediately, actually, the need for that young person to work, not necessarily maybe for themselves, but for the household, is insanely much higher. That pressure is, and that child sitting next to them in the classroom, I'm going to say drifting along. Yes, model house, model family, loving parents, everything supported, and that child next to them. And I think that young carer wants to appear exactly the same as that child next to them. They want to appear identical. They would love to be that. They'd love to have that. And I think that's why they hold on to all that stuff, because they're trying to be that child, be that young person, but carrying all that extra load. Yeah.
I think help them not feel that they're missing out. It's just the family dynamic will be different. And then the way that we approach days out or things like Christmas, it just has to look different. And I've had conversations with my family recently about that, because the family are like, oh, we want to see all of you. We want to, it's a family time. This is what we should be doing. But it's not always easy for us to do that, because it's not in the best interest of everybody in our immediate family. So we're not going to put them in a position where they're going to be upset about it. So it's just me, but some people see it as missing out, but it's just different. It's just things have to change. It'll just have to look different. And that's what supporting young carers, that's what they need to know, that they're not missing out, that it's just going to be slightly different. And they're giving young carers the opportunity to experience things differently. Like, for example, the local authority support that could be in place if you are identified as a young carer with local authority support, then they can put on things like events and clubs and even just Zooms, just a conversation to meet other young carers and talk. So there's opportunities, there's other opportunities. It just has to look a bit different.
So right at the beginning, remember you just touched on local authority there, which made me think about it, is we right at the beginning we said schools are now required to identify and report young carers. Are all your young carers reported to where they should be? Is every young carer identified?
No, I mean, every young carer that we've identified, I take them through a conversation, and then we look at the level of support. We look at if they would be happy for local authority support. And then I talk to the parents, because parents have to give approval before we can make any referral. But not all students want that. So they'll say, no, actually, you know what, we're all right. And that's fine, because that's their decision. They might not need it now, but my job is to let them know that it is there and it is available to them. And if anything changes throughout their time at school, or even after, a referral to the local authority might be worth it later on, but it's not worth it now. So out of our young carers, we've got 68 in the school at the moment. We've got about 21 of them registered with the local authority. So, as I said, some students have just said, no, not right now. Some students have said, that's not me, which is absolutely fine. But as long as they know that if that changes and they want to have that conversation, they know who to go to. They know we've got a lunchtime group available. That's like our drop-in group. And there's no structure to it. So it literally is like a little bit like a youth club. They just come and have a break, come and have a rest. They can eat their lunch there. They can charge their phones. It's the only place in school where students are allowed to charge their phones, and they can call home if they need to. That's important for some of the students, just to peace of mind, just to check in with home. And then sometimes we do some activities, like around Christmas, we do some arts and crafts and making decorations. We decorate the Christmas tree. So that's space for young carers to come and take that break. But they know that I'm going to be there every week as well. So if there's anything they need to talk about, that's a good time to check in with me. And then I can book a different time to come and see them and have that conversation.
Nice.
I think we've got a clip we can add there, can't we?
Yes.
One thing that really helps me at school is the Young Carers Club, or the fact that I can just drop in any time to get help. A member of staff at school who helps me is Miss Thompson.
Okay, so for our students, knowing that there is that group available, that time available, that space available, just actually takes a lot off their mind. And that's where the older students have engaged more with, because they've been able to come in and just charge their phones or call home, and then they won't get in trouble for it. So that's quite an important thing, I think, that schools need to make an adjustment for.
And I'm just going to touch on that mobile phone, because if you are a young carer, and especially if you are caring for an adult and you are that go-to person, then not being contactable is not great. So you mentioned that they're allowed to call home. Are these young children allowed their phones on them? Just one of those questions with such a phones are bad.
School rule, no. The school rule is to have phones switched off all day in your bag, not out in pockets or anything like that. So that is the school rule. So in order to stick with that, on a Thursday lunchtime group for our young carers, they are allowed to be on their phone and check in. And that's been, I'd love to do that every week, like every day of the week for them, but I'm not available every day of the week. I work part-time, so I'm not always there. But they know if that is a concern at any other time, they can come and find me, and then I will be with them to help them through. If they desperately need to, call home on a different day, if I'm there with them, then we can take them away and we can sort that out. But they know as well that if it can wait, then let's make it wait till Thursday lunchtime, and then that's the time to handle that. And if there's any support that they need with appointments or anything like that, then I'm always on hand to help with that as well.
So earlier you talked about, so you've got I think it's probably just on really basic maths, under a third of them are actually registered with your young carers. So one of my questions is, and limited experience as a governor and knowing not all children want to be kind of that reported to the local authority, is there kind of a fear of, if I get reported as a young carer and they come in and find out what's going on, social services might come involved and something might change? Is there that fear?
Absolutely.
And also on the flip side, does that happen?
No. So every time I speak to students, I was like, well, the local authority can help you. And the first thing I have to say is, it's not social services. It's not the same thing. It's a completely different department. Nobody's going to get in trouble. All it is support for the young carer, for their caring role. So it's important that is identified, but they're not going to make any judgment or reporting on any other area. This is purely for a caring role, because we know what the toll it takes physically, emotionally, and there is support there. So that's the main thing. And I have spoken to parents as well when I call and say, I've had this conversation about being a young carer. And the same thing, I'm like, it's not social services, so please don't worry about that. And then, we go into a deeper conversation. But yeah.
And just to be clear,
important.
I'm not bashing you, social service people, but you have that sort of thing that it's like one of those words, it's like Ofsted, social services. It just sparks fear in people.
But they are completely different teams, different areas, and it's important to know that there is that one just purely for carers, and then the young carers have their own support available. So yeah.
So as a school, you've kind of done a lot of work about kind of raising the profile, raising awareness. identifying these young carers, has there been a change in the kind of staff? Have you seen them kind of go, oh?
Yes, absolutely. As soon as I started doing the briefings and just talking openly about it, I get emails all the time now. So all the staff members have got involved and said, oh, this student's mentioned this, or this student's mentioned a disabled sibling, or, and it all, I didn't have that before. Nobody was really looking at that before. So this is an area that's definitely developed. And another thing from the briefings is that quite a few staff members have said to me, from listening to your briefings about young carers, I actually think I was a young carer growing up. And it's interesting to see how many of those conversations have been sparked just from, oh yeah, do you know what, I had that. And it would have been useful to have somebody to talk to, or somebody who understood. I think that's the big thing in school. People that, if you know that there is that culture and environment, and knowing that support is available within school, and it's not going to be judged for it or anything like that, then that's a big thing. Just that conversation, just that understanding can make a big difference to a student's life. Yeah.
Completely. And I think, and as much as we shouldn't have to label someone as a young carer or someone as a send, to kind of someone to give them a bit of, oh, yeah, don't worry about being late. If it just makes people think, and just sometimes that label doesn't mean anything in one hand, but actually if it makes that person stop and go, yeah, there's probably a lot I don't know about, I'm gonna pause on this.
Yes. And going on from the support that we have around the group, we actually managed to put together a trip for our young carers in September last year. And this was a way that we managed to engage some of the older students. So we had a list of 14 students that we took with us to Wales. So we went to Porthmadog, and we stayed in a residential centre called Gethlywig, and that's managed by the Birch Thompson Memorial Fund. And we stayed there, so we took them for 3 days, 2 nights, and then it was just a break. So we weren't there to be studying or to be doing anything like that. It literally just was a break from their caring role, and it went really well. I mean, I couldn't have asked for anything better. The students were great, and some of them didn't even know each other. Like, they weren't aware that they were all carers, because a few people that come to the group are regulars, but then there'll be other students that didn't really reach out for that support. But then when they came on this group and they spoke to each other, and they hang out, they would play games with each other and things like that, and they just realised that there were other students like them, and friendships developed from that. So that's worked out really well.
When we went to the trip at Wales, it was a really nice experience because we got to meet people that we didn't know, and we made friendships.
So one of my questions, I asked about the staff and kind of how they've changed, but one of my next question was, has there been a change in the students? And I was going to ask, is there a connection now? Is there like a community of young carers who kind of know what they're each going through? Different circumstances, but that shared understanding, that shared going, actually, yeah, we both know what it's like.
Absolutely. So that's what that trip managed to do. It helped them realise that there were other students in the same or similar positions. And then we also did a few things with them where we asked them to put together the meal plans, and we took them shopping so that they could choose the foods that they needed, because that's all tasks that a young carer might have to do anyway. They weren't allowed to do the cooking, so the staff members had to do the cooking. There were 3 members of staff, myself included, that went on the trip, and so we were doing all the cooking for them, which they loved. But it was really nice to sit together as all together at one big table and sharing these meals. And then we did some activities. We took them on a old-fashioned railway, like a steam train railway, and then there's a beach nearby. So we took them in the evenings, and it was in September, so it was a lovely opportunity just for them to let off steam, just to be kids and not think about their caring role.
And I think my final question around the kind of the culture within the school, And generally, as you said, they don't advertise their young carers. They don't wear a T-shirt. They don't have a badge. They don't strut going, I'm a young carer. They kind of keep it kind of private. Yeah, it's something they're kind of living with, coping with. Have students been more confident in themselves? Do they share more? Are they not, again, broadcasting, but, if it comes up, they might actually share something about their experiences?
Absolutely. That's one thing I've noticed. Definitely more confident and just being okay in themselves. Like they're not embarrassed by it. They're not hiding it. So, which kind of, makes them feel a lot more confident, but also happy in themselves.
Yes.
So that has definitely made a difference. And they know as well, if there is something that they need to talk about, then they can be open. They can come and talk to. It's not just me, there's other members of staff as well, that they can just talk about their caring role. Whereas previously they might not have wanted to mention it at all. Whereas now they can.
But also, I think when you kind of, and again, for no reason, but it kind of is that hidden thing that they'll be with all their friends and it'll be completely hidden. You just maybe not go to their house, or they never come out, or something that's never talked about. And maybe people don't even notice. And the moment they kind of start opening up, that can drip into conversations. Friends can go, actually, could we do something different? So they can. And I think being happy themselves that they actually can share something, and others knowing, you're then giving the opportunity to others to adapt and to support their friends.
Yes, absolutely. And also the discussions that they have around disability as well. So if they are aware that their friends have this caring role, or they have somebody that they need to support, that young carer's behaviour, the way that they talk around disability or anything like that, it's like they're modelling to their peers, this is how we should be talking. Actually, we're not going to use, the words to upset people or call people names. We're not going to do that. So that kind of a culture is something that I was really keen to develop in school. And I always, any kind of comments, derogatory comments about any kind of disability or anything like that, I'm always quite clear to shut that down, because that's not what we do. That's not what we do at St Regis. That's not the culture that we have here.
Generally, I think when people say those derogatory things, whether it's about where someone's from, their immigration status, their various other things about that person, generally it's said not knowing a person, not having any impact, not having any experience, not having any contact. And also, I can say this because it doesn't impact me. I'm in a circle miles away from that. And therefore my actions don't really matter what I say. And the moment you suddenly realize somebody next to you in your classroom, your friend that you've known for years, actually, that changes everything. It suddenly brings it close to home. And that's the point, I think, when it's much closer, that's when you start thinking about, do my actions have consequences? Have I said something I shouldn't? And once you start realizing maybe that you've got somebody with a disability around you and you didn't know, you start then questioning, maybe actually, what else do I not know? What else should I be thinking about? And it just makes us really very aware that actually words do really hurt.
Yeah.
Words really do hurt. We all say sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never. Yes, they really do. And they can stay with you for a really long time.
Yes, and the language is very important. So some of the students might not even understand some of the words that they're saying. So it is important to pick them up and, do you know where that term actually originated from? Or do you know you're not using that correctly? So yes, language is definitely important. And our young carers, as you said, they're getting more confident. They're quite happy to talk about it. They're happy to share that, that they've done these comments for the podcast. And the trip that we went on, there's been like photos and stuff around school. So they're okay with it. They're not hiding it as much anymore, which is, again, one of the things. And the award that we've achieved as well. So we've got the Young Carers in Schools Award, and we were the first school in Wolverhampton to achieve that. So we're quite proud about that. And the students are really proud as well because of their involvement in the creation of it. So this award is run by the Carers Trust and the Children's Society. and they've put together, it's a structure to follow to implement support in school. I'd already started on that road, putting things in place. And then when I came across this, I was like, brilliant, this is exactly what we're doing. So let's finish this. And as I said, it's done things now that we've got our own policy. We've got a young carers policy for the school, which we never had before. And then you can see a poster there. We've got this colour scheme that we use for our young carers. Anything young carers is all in that colour scheme. So when students see it on screens or on displays and things like that, they know what that is immediately. So that's been quite helpful with that. If there are schools out there who are considering putting young carer support in place, definitely have a look for the Young Carers in Schools awards that you can aim for. Our trust, the Three Spires Trust that we're a part of, they've taken on what we've done here, and we're implementing it now in all the schools in the trust. And then there's a further award. There's a plus award that we are now aiming towards, which includes what I was mentioned before about attainment. So like how we're keeping on top of young carers' attainment levels as well. So it's the extra things that you can aim for just to improve the setup at school and how the school is handling these conversations, the support, the identifying, the signposting, and working with the local authority as well. I think we've got quite a good relationship with our Wolverhampton Carers team. So keeping those relationships going and just building on what's available, and just all for the students' outcomes, to improve their outcomes so they're not a statistic, but so that we can help them as much as we can.
So I mentioned again, going back to that requirement to identify and report young carers, that's an Ofsted requirement, isn't it?
Yes, it's also in the census as well.
So census.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, it's like, you're counting them and Ofsted mentioning them. Should we just be counting them? Or probably, what's the reason we're counting them? There's a reason? Yes, this. Oh. And I sometimes think that you need to monitor, you need to count them. There's generally, I always like it, it's subtle, you need to count them. Well, there's a lot of them. What's the impact? Oh, and I think it's one of those things. I like the fact that it's just, you need to identify and report the young carers. It's like, oh, yes, we probably also need to do something about it. That's the reason we're being asked. But they're not prescriptive in that way, because every school is going to be different. And it is interesting, I think, when people think of young carers, they generally think of supporting an adult in their household.
Yes.
But it's that siblings as well is a really important factor, especially with the SEND community. Actually, what is the impact of their sibling having SEND?
Yes, and it's important to make that distinction as well between the carers who have a heavy caring role, usually for a parent, and then the ones that need more of the emotional support. I mean, both, to be honest, but lots of emotional support for both sides. But that distinction between the two,
they're both kind of invisible. Within the household, they're both kind of invisible. Them as a person, it's like you are a carer for that. Or if it's an adult, or as a sibling, is actually we need to make sure your sibling and you kind of just tag along, not in a negative way. And it's never meant, but it doesn't mean that's how it feels sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's knowing it's a caring role. I mean, labels is another conversation, but if you don't want to have that label, it's not about that. It's about understanding. It's about knowing that it's still a part of your life. So don't ignore it, but you can embrace it and you can share it and you can ask for help. I think that's one of the biggest things.
I think if your feelings are valid, but it's understanding that your perception and someone else's perception is completely different and maybe unaware, and that could change. It might not be able to change, but it's how do you deal with that?
And at school, we want to help you having those conversations. So we don't want it to build up with resentment or fear or anything like that. And then you have to go and sit your really important exams. It's one of those things that you shouldn't be thinking about at the same time. So if there is a way that the school can do that, then that is something we should be doing, really. And I would say for any schools as well who are thinking about setting this up, find that staff member who has a caring role, because there will be any kind of caring role, who will be able to empathise, but also have a bit of that passion towards supporting carers. And I think it's definitely helped with me in terms of my conversation that I am a carer myself. So having the conversations with the children has been able to, well, I understand, I don't know what it's like to be a young carer, but I understand having a caring role. And then we've been able to bond that way. And a lot of parents that I've spoken to when I've had those conversations and we want to make referrals, I wasn't sure when I started how many parents would be on board with that. But most of them, if not all, have said, thank you for bringing this up. Thank you that there's support available. So there shouldn't be a fear of having that conversation and saying, it's not social services, it's just extra carers support, and that it is available to you.
My message to others would be to don't be afraid to open up, because if you really want to build that trust with your friends, I would say it's better if they know some of those things which can get in the way, because that would be really helpful for you and them at the same time, so you're both on the same page. And also, support in school matters, because sometimes when you're busy with school, you don't really get that support at home if home's like a bit chaotic sometimes. So if you have that support at school, that would really help. And with exams coming up, teachers can understand and help you even further, just in case if you don't have time at home.
I think that's a great message there. Exactly what we've been talking about, all the support that we've put in place, and how it is received. I think our carers, as I said before, they're proud to be able to talk about it and not hide it. And it is something that they will take with them throughout through their exams and then onto jobs, and having those skills because of what they've had at home and they've been through. It's being able to look at that positively and being able to use it rather than hide it and feel bad about it, because that's not going to be helpful for any kind of employment, really.
No, and also if you kind of look back at it negatively, you're going to kind of think of that, and it's not that's the reason this happened or that's that. Is how you perceive whether something happened or not. It's how you perceive it, and is that moving on part. And even if things are not how you want them to be, you missed out on so much. How you perceive that and how you move on from there, it's kind of, will you let it impact the rest of your life in a negative way, or will you find some positivity and use that going forward?
Absolutely.
And I think I'll wrap it up there.
Okay.
Thank you for coming on the show today. And as always, you'll find Kasia's contact details in our show. You'll also find links to the various organisations supporting young carers. As I said, we used a couple of clips of the lovely young people at your school, but there were more, and we've put a link to that audio in the show notes as well. And as always, you'll find the show notes wherever you listen to the podcast or on our website. Thank you for listening to the show. If you're listening to our platform that allows you to leave a review, please give it a rating. Please leave a review and let others know what you think. Now, here at B Squared, we help to show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make. And we help to show schools, show that progress for a wide range of abilities and ages. And we have a range of frameworks from birth to 25. We have our engagement steps, our early steps, progression steps, primary steps, steps for life. Huge range of frameworks suiting different children at different ages, different abilities. Visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our assessment software and all our different frameworks. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Zencast. It's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.